Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. Her favourite actor is Tom Cruise, Leanne Hughes.
Hello everyone and welcome to the show. I'm your host Leanne Hughes and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. Now today's show is sponsored by my personal website at leannehughes.com. You can see where I am, what I'm up to over on that website. Okay, we're up to episode 88. Unreal. The number 88 symbolizes fortune and good luck in Chinese culture, since the word 8 sounds similar to the word fa, which implies wealth in Mandarin or Cantonese. So if you're listening into this one, I wish you all the fortune, wealth, and good luck. And hey, look, you're very lucky to be listening into today's guest, as he has a really great perspective on how to help businesses succeed by creating authentic and exceptional customer experiences. His name is Tom Scantlebury and he is the founder of Sky Blue Customer Experiences Services. Tom is based down the Gold Coast in Australia. What surprised me about this interview was uncovering the real parallels between the work that Tom does in helping his clients deliver exceptional experiences and the work that we do as facilitators every day in our drive to create exceptional experiences for our workshop participants. As a hotelier for 20 years, Tom cut his teeth in the industry that invented customer service. As the digital age emerged and gave rise to the voice of the customer, Tom pivoted into the newly formed field of customer experience, that's CX management. He founded his customer experience consulting business, Sky Blue, in 2016. Now, they help their clients understand and improve the impact they make with their customers and employees, and in doing so, deliver profitable and purposeful business outcomes. Tom has successfully implemented and managed numerous domestic and international CX programs across multiple sectors. He's also chaired CX expert forums and has appeared as a keynote speaker and thought leader in front of Australia's biggest brands. Tom is a self-confessed fan of authentic experiences and businesses that are committed to delivering them. He also seeks out great experiences in his leisure time and is a massive surfing and snowboarding nut who loves nothing more than sharing a wave with his kids. He's working on having all three of them share the same wave with him. All the best, Tom, with that goal. I hope you make it someday. Now, this interview was recorded face-to-face in Brisbane. I'm a bit of a digital nomad and I don't have a stable Monday to Friday office location. Tom was in Brisbane for the day and he volunteered to find an office space to record this interview in. Well, the room he found ended up being just having incredibly epic views of the Story Bridge and the Brisbane River. It was unreal. And even from this one meeting with Tom, it shows his commitment to creating exceptional, authentic experiences. Like, he is the guest on this show. It wasn't his job to go around and find office space. That should be my job. So I just thought I'd share this quick snippet to share that it really demonstrates his commitment to doing what he does, and this whole thing about creating great experiences is probably quite innate to him. If you want to continue the conversation when the podcast is over, you can join our community of over 300 facilitators from all over the world on the Facebook group called The Flip Chart. This week I did a Facebook Live on there sharing how I got the Paris gig, what that workshop was on, and some of my observations delivering across cultures. And we also have details in the group for a facilitator meetup in Brisbane on the 2nd of November. So if you'd like to know more, just join us at the group, or if you don't use Facebook, shoot me an email, leanne@leannehughes.com. You can view a link to the group, Tom's contact info, and other resources mentioned in this episode in the lucky show notes for this one at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 88. Now, on to the show. I'd like to welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Tom Scantlebury. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Leanne. Great to be here.
Tom, as you know, you've listened to the show for some time. I always love kickstarting episodes by asking our facilitators a bit about their background, because every facilitator's story is different. So you share your career highlights and pivots with our listeners.
Okay. I left school, had no idea what to do, but I was pretty obsessed with the beach, and I found a degree that was just starting, which was a Bachelor of Hotel Management on the Gold Coast. So I thought, that sounds right up my alley. And I kind of fell into the career of a hotelier, but it was well suited and I loved it. Interestingly, in my degree, my favourite subject was learning and development, and I got my best mark. But I didn't pick up the sign at the time and went on to do almost 20 years as a hotelier, which really is essentially the industry that invented customer service, if you think about it. It's in the DNA. So what happened over time was I actually ended up being a guest relations manager for one role, and I was charged with training the 350 staff about kind of service techniques and stuff. So I dabbled in facilitation, but fast forward quite a long time, and I'd specialised in opening up new properties, new hotels, and so I had lots of kind of experience training new teams and getting them to focus on culture and customers. And along came the smart device. It was only 2010, I think it was, 2010 or 2011. Before that, we didn't have these amazing supercomputers in our phones. But what they did was they created what we call the age of the customer. So there was no TripAdvisor and Google Review, and these things happened pretty quickly, which meant that businesses started to really focus on how their customers were feeling, because if somebody put a bad review up, and it wasn't just hospitality, it really launched this space called customer experience. And that for me was the big pivot, which made me move into customer experience management, which has been a rapidly evolving business. All the big guys in town, they've all got customer experience teams now, and the new role we're talking about at Microsoft and other big companies called Chief Experience Officer. So I moved out of hotels into experience management, and then kind of made the big pivot after doing the Clifton Strength Finder that told me that facilitation was really my happy place, and started my own business, which is Sky Blue, about 3 or so years ago. And it's been a wild ride since then.
Such a cool story. It's funny you mentioned Clifton Strengths Finder. I think if you're listening and you're sort of head of a HR team or department and you're listening to this, because I also quit my job after doing Clifton Strengths Finder. So organisations might be a little bit scared to implement that tool in their organisation because what it does is actually reveals what your strengths are. If you're not tapping into that every single day, you can negotiate with your boss and try to find other opportunities. But if you're not there, then you might need to make a tough decision. So 3 years on, what's your company doing now? What are you really focusing on?
Well, we like to do the heavy lifting. So every business seems to be genuinely interested in delivering better experiences. So better experiences for their customers. Now, there's a model called the service profit chain. So businesses make money because they've got happy customers. There are happy customers because there are happy employees. So this kind of experience chain really ties into interactions between people in a business. So we will usually get the call from somebody who might be interested in improving their customer experience. We call it CX. And we'll get in and start kind of assessing where they are on their maturity curve. Now, the curve keeps climbing. Experiences need to continue to get better. So we really do a lot around measuring. So we'll measure where their customers say they're at, where their employees say they're at to start with. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of design where are the key opportunities. Let's have a look at this thing called a customer journey map. It's a workshop that we do. And we just try to drive up the empathy for businesses' customers. The ideas and the opportunities just start kind of falling all over the place. And so we just build a bit of a roadmap, and that's where the training facilitation comes in, because we really try to skill people up in that kind of empathetic approach, and then working out how to kind of optimize those moments that matter with their customers. And then we want to measure that we've made the difference. And so we have an ongoing measurement program. We partner with the world's largest experience management company called Qualtrics. If you've done a survey from a business, you would have definitely used Qualtrics. They're absolutely massive, and they are really at the leading edge that helps us kind of engage with customers to check how they're feeling about their experiences over time. And we kind of do all of that and help businesses just kind of climb that curve.
Let's talk about that. You talked about the maturity level of the customer experience that the company is operating. Do you get more calls when customers sort of, oh my gosh, we've seen a negative review on Google, or
TripAdvisor, we really need to build this? Or do you get more calls from people that go, look, we've got a really great customer experience, we now want to make it better? What kind of range of calls do you get from companies? Is it like a bell curve?
I think that the kind of opportunities that come our way, most leaders look outside their business for inspiration and improvement. So I think often, and this goes back to the hospitality stuff, they'll have a great experience on an airline or at a hotel, and they'll come back and say, I want that kind of experience for our customers. Tom, can you help? Quite often, because this real movement has really originated in the States, they're about a few years ahead across the board from Australia. So quite often I think it's businesses looking at opportunity to improve. And really, it's a really competitive marketplace. So no matter what the sector, I think there's this thing called the experience gap. 80% of executives or CEOs, this is a piece of research done by Forresters a while ago, 80% of CEOs say that they provide exceptional experiences for their customers.
The CEO says that?
That's what they say.
Yeah.
80% of all companies from their,
Not biased
mahogany
at all.
office,
Yeah.
their customers say about 8% of their customers actually believe that to be the case. So it's this thing called the experience gap that exists universally. So, yeah, sometimes there'll be a bit of a wake-up call where there's like a big complaint or a series of complaints, or somebody will go, hey, you know what? I know somebody who went through interaction with your business and it really stunk. But when you are sitting at the top of the tree, you don't get to see and feel that. So experience management helps kind of turn the lights on and uncover all of the things you can't see.
You spoke about was it the optimal moments to maximise in terms of the interaction with your customer? Was that the phrase that you used? I was thinking of a really great example I heard in a speech. I think it was a few years ago. I think it was a guy that runs Yellow Brick Mortgage. Who's that mortgage guy? Mark Boris.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for jogging my memory. Yeah. And he showed this business card. What it was, he was at a hotel and he looked under the bed and there was a business card that said, yes, we even clean under here too. I thought, how clever. Like that was a real optimal moment. Obviously that would have spread and gone viral as well on social media.
Yeah.
Do you have any, we've talked about, like that's a really interesting fact. 80% of CEOs think they're delivering a great experience. 8% of customers would actually agree. What are some great stories of things that you've observed or companies you've worked for or just admired, particularly you said the States is leading the way?
Yeah. Well, I've got my Apple computer sitting here, my Apple phone. So
we're Team Apple. I've got the watch.
They're kind of everywhere, but everything they do is pretty smart. Now, what they did a while ago was they obviously decided to go into retail. So they looked at retail with a whole different kind of approach. And if you go into any Apple store, it looks and feels different to any other store. So they designed and tested what that journey looks like. So when you walk up to the front door of an Apple store, you walk into any tech store, there's tech everywhere, it's overwhelming. So when you walk up to an Apple store, you've got a concierge. So they know there's this measurement called the NPS. So it's how likely are you to recommend Apple to a friend or family member. So they measure that for every retail interaction. And they know if they do not have a concierge on the front door, they drop about 25 NPS points. Because the minute you walk in, somebody, and they're trained on personalisation, they use your name, they're very good with body language. They're not techies, right? They're people connecting with other people. And it's very it's not scripted, but it's very natural. It's calming. So they do that. But one of the cool things that they do is any interaction you have, like a journey, has got peaks and troughs. And what we look at is like, where's the emotion? Where's the emotion high? Where's it low? You want to kind of accentuate the highs. So if you think about when you buy a car, long lead up time to that point, but when you get the keys, that's a big deal.
Big ribbon on the hood.
Well, that's all started through this whole kind of customer experience transformation. So automotive never used to do that stuff. Then one of them would do it. Then the others were like, well, if BMW are doing it, Mercedes need to do this too. So it's great as a customer. We're enjoying all of these kind of like improved experiences because they know that's a moment where you're likely to get your phone out and share it with your social media about how amazing the local kind of dealership is. But one of the really simple things is the box with your Apple product. So what they'll do is they'll cut the plastic off, but they'll let you open the box.
I didn't even know that.
Well, you wouldn't. It's subtle and designed. Like not everyone would look under that bed.
Exactly.
But it's designed just in case people do, and it's clever. Now, the reason that is the boxes are made just snug enough that as you lift them, if you've kept them in your box, it's like a suction. It's like a suction that they've designed so that moment is extended just that little bit longer. And that's the moment
I love that feeling now that you mention it. Yeah.
It's like Christmas.
Yes.
But that's very deliberate. And you say you love it.
Yeah.
They know that's great design. They know the emotion that they're trying to get and that they make sure that happens to everybody. Because really, any guy working there would just rip the box open and here's your computer. But they know, no, that's your moment. Let's have that. And I keep all my boxes just to kind of show people. Me too. I keep my boxes
as well. Yeah, I thought I was being a hoarder, but is it because we remember that experience and the design is so beautiful?
Yeah. So there's one of many Apple examples anyway.
It's funny because on my recent travels, I've got like a toiletry bag that I use. And I just think, gosh, it's so annoying because things explode and it doesn't fit everything. And I was just thinking, gosh, I wish Apple could design toiletry bags. Can you imagine? Okay, now let's move on to your customer experience workshops and so the works that you do for a client. So they've reached out for you, you've sort of had a conversation. What's your next step in terms of when do you recommend a workshop and then what does that workshop include?
Well, we need to start with the leadership and really kind of shift their thinking from that, 80% down to the 8%. So we do a lot of work just getting teams of people out of their operational heads and into their customer heads to walk in their shoes. So that's really usually the first engagement we have is what we call a customer journey workshop, and we'll pick a key journey, usually like an onboarding or a first introduction to the business or whatever it might be. And we'll change this up a fair bit, but ultimately we get the teams to create personas like real customers, give them names, give them families, give them a background, give them a story. And then we break that down and we do what we call empathy mapping, and we start saying, what do they see when they interact with you? What do they hear? And then we get into the good stuff. It's like, what do they feel? What do they say? What do they think? And so we get quite deep. We give them names, like I said, and then we start walking them through a journey, and not just a perfect smooth journey when things start going wrong. We have huge insights because we just function with all of the work from our perspective. But when you kind of spin that around, you start to see all of the things which the 8% have been seeing all the time, and those realizations are amazing. And so that'll usually be, okay, well, that might be the bad experience. Now let's redesign this and accentuate those highs, like the Apple box. Where are those high moments and where are those low moments? So let's remove the friction and accentuate the kind of peak moments to end up with a better experience.
Do you find some CEOs are quite confronted and just want to start fixing things straight away? There's a sense of urgency when they notice, this page on the website isn't working, or, oh man, no one answered that phone call. It's like you said, it wakes them up. Do you kind of need to comfort them?
That's my role really, and I can come in and I can be quite provocative. And what I love to do really is to collect real customer information first. So I'm not just saying what I've seen. I don't really like the whole mystery shopping approach. We like to use the data from real customers and use that real information because you can't argue with that. There's a saying that the customer is always right, and I like to bring that one out because people are very defensive around their work. They work really hard. So the minute that somebody starts complaining, this is for me a bit of a test of if I've got a good fit with a client because I heard some people say our customers are idiots. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, that CEO is probably not, we're not going to get too far. But generally, there's a genuine care for customers with CEOs. And so they take their medicine. They look at it and they go, well, let's roll up our sleeves. And what we want to do is don't just kind of knee jerk. Let's try to design it so this interaction will be good for the next 5-10 years, not just let's fix that one customer and make that go away.
Yeah, the Band-Aid.
Yeah, that's right. So there are a few kind of wide-eyed moments, but that's the thing. It's a bold process to go through. So it's quite illuminating. And, a lot of people want to get in and fix it, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. for sure.
As are many things like leadership and creating great cultures. So let's talk about, are there parallels between, we talk about experiences generally, so the customer experience is one, but there's also the employee experience. So do you find that they're correlated? Do you find that if more employees are engaged and love the work they do, then naturally they develop a great customer experience? Or have you seen, or is there a complete disconnect and you can still have disengaged employees that can deliver? What have you noticed in companies and the matching between those two things?
Yeah, look, Leanne, is that, I mean, intuitively we know this to be the way that things are. So, but all of the research, there's a guy called Fred Reichheld who came up with the Net Promoter Score. Out of Harvard, it was this kind of, he'd done a lot of work in advocacy economics. So he now, I've seen him speak a few times, and he no longer talks about customers. He talks about employees almost exclusively, because he says, you've just got to start with your people. You've got to start with your people, because experiences are about feelings. Feelings are delivered by people making connections. If you have a business and you want to create positive connections, then people have got to be in the right mindset, and that comes down to culture. So the programs that we put together really are about starting with the individual, working up to the team, then introducing the customer. So 100%. I mean, the thing is, like I said, that maturity curve, it goes on and on. Mm. And you can't tackle everything at once, but we really focus on pulling a team together first. That's when my experience in opening hotels, we would spend a lot of time selecting the right people. Then we'd spend a lot of time before we open the doors, pulling that team together. And then we're talking about how we're going to interact with our customers. So the last two that we did, we got, I think one of them we got to number 1 on TripAdvisor within 2 weeks. And that was where there was 180
what
locations.
What are you doing?
Well, it's all this stuff. We're focusing on the right thing. We're rallying around the customer. And we really had fun in creating the culture. And there was a new brand. It was great fun. And it didn't have great facilities. The rooms were small. There was no pool. So really, we know when you get the team right, you get the people right, then the experiences will flow. You do need to focus and measure both. But absolutely, it's about people first.
That's a really great example. You're lucky that you were able to recruit and pick the right people. As a consultant, you're working with teams that already exist and you don't have the autonomy to go, right, you're gone. We're going to bring in like people that have that mindset. So in your training sessions, how do you get people to embrace this mindset of being proactive, being engaging, putting customer first, if that necessarily hasn't been the way up to that point? Okay,
so we start with the leadership and we do those kind of journey mapping bits and pieces, but then it's time to get out and kind of deliver that message to the front line to deliver those designed experiences essentially. So we don't start there. Like I said, we start with the individual. So we'll get a group of people together and it doesn't matter how long you've got, but we always start by, I think you talked about an example about throwing the tennis ball, the balls.
Yes.
It's like, okay, the thinking that we had before didn't work. Well, it doesn't necessarily apply in here. We're going to open people up to a degree. So we always start with, let's look at ourselves first, how we show up to work, how we interact with each other, and the choices that I make on a daily basis. That gives us a little bit of leverage, and then how we treat each other. And so we've got a few different models depending on how long we have with the team or where they might be at. But we always talk about those conscious choices that individuals make first. And how we can kind of navigate our own emotions when we're not feeling great. But it comes down to awareness. Like essentially we're trying to build better experiences and connections with others, but we need to kind of put an effort into that first individually. Now, we can't control what the culture's like around there, but we can certainly help control how everybody who walks out of that room feels at that moment. And we put some accountability steps in place, and we hope that we've moved the needle in the positive, and then we've got a bit of a roadmap. So it's not just an instructional guide. There's a bit of kind of like a behavioural advice and those kind of things that we sprinkle in.
Cool. Let's talk about those accountability steps, because often the challenge for anyone listening, for myself personally, you go and run a workshop, people leave feeling great and motivated. Then sometimes they enter back into the real world, their office or their work environment, and things aren't matching up to what they'd learned, and that can be disengaging as well. So how do you create a little bit of a behaviour change? What kind of measurement tools or, like you said, the accountability steps that you bring in so that people are walking out, they feel great, but also embedding it back when they get back to work?
The first thing which we can't always control, but you know when people go away on training and there's no engagement from their leader before or afterwards?
Yes.
You know that happens,
It still
right?
happens.
Yeah. So, what a waste of an investment, because we try to obviously get the leadership to engage, even be in the room, depending where we're at. So that's kind of one key step. But what we're talking about is, I think you talk about
unpredictability, yeah.
So what we try to do is we have designed these experiences. We know what the outcomes we want them to look like, and we build up to that. Then at the end of that kind of program, we'll say, well, what we're going to do now, we're going to measure the impact on the customers. We know what we want them to feel. We know what we want them to experience. So it's almost like a quality assurance step. But that's the whole beauty of experience management is we start with the optimal, then we kind of get out and train people to it, then we measure the impact of it. And so what we can do in real terms is come back and say, we were training on personalisation. We were training on building rapport. We were training on using people's names. So we can measure specifically, did the agent welcome you by name? Yes or no?
Yes.
And we can start to kind of come back, because we know that's a really key, it triggers oxytocin.
Using someone's name?
Yeah. It's such a hack, right? There's these kind of experience hacks that we use.
Tom, sorry I haven't used your name in this interview yet.
Leanne, you did look me in the eye,
yes.
I know that. So I feel like we've got a connection, it's fine. But when you do that with a customer, it triggers oxytocin, and what we see, and what happens is then they start having more of a conversation with you, even if the interaction is very short, because there's a lot that goes on in your biology here. So there's the kind of, the reptile, mammalian and the human brain. So your emotions are triggered from that kind of like
system.
The reptilian and mammalian stuff. So you don't even know that it's happening, but you use my name and straight away I've got this little burst of positive hormones, which is saying, I trust these people. Now, it's not a logical thought, but it's just happened. And it's happened because a staff member has deliberately tried to use your name. And so we know that's important, so we measure it. And so we can come back and say, this is what you were before, this is where you are now. Fantastic. Because really the key for measurement is like using that as fuel and recognition, and that's where we get our leaders to really engage with the feedback to help drive that positive reinforcement. And again, that does stuff with the brain. It's like positive reinforcement. You get that positive feedback loop. You get recognised, hey, look, you got a 10 out of 10. You get recognition from your manager, it's incentive to do it again. Then the people around you start doing it as well. So it's this whole kind of movement towards more connection, positivity, yeah.
I like you mentioned the data is used for fuel and recognition and not for finger pointing, because data can be weaponized in the negative as well. So it's really nice that it's used to positively reinforce. I guess the only where I've seen this is just at Singapore airport toilets. That was probably the one that they started about 10 years ago with the, you walk out, how clean was this bathroom, vote. So that whole instant pulse check that you've got there.
Yes.
In terms of running these workshops, I want to talk about how you prepare for these things. So you've been in business for 3 years. It sounds like you've got like a range of models and tools that you use in these, depending on how much time you have with the client.
Yeah.
How do you personally prepare for an upcoming workshop?
So we have essentially models that we use, but often it'll be quite a specific business, and they might have a call centre, or they've got a complaints department, or it might be a annual conference. And so we never really show up. I never really show up and do the same thing each time. So, for example, I've got one coming up in a few weeks, and I'll do the kind of discovery with the client to make sure we check in with what they want to get out of it. So we want to understand what are the outcomes that they want. So I'll start there. Then I'll go away and have a bit of a whiteboard session on my own, put things together. What I like to do is just then park it. And I'll be walking the dog, and then things will come to me and things. And I just tend to, particularly if it's a big keynote, I'll go over it in my head and it'll start falling into place. And then I'll come back and start fleshing it out a little bit. I'll usually get a colleague to bounce things off. And I might do a check-in, but essentially clients are so busy, you're the expert, they've kind of engaged you to come and do it for them. So as long as you're kind of clear on the outcomes and how you'll approach it, you've usually got quite a bit to do yourself. And then, I might try to practice, but I just visualise and practice a lot of it in my head. I find it quite easy to kind of see how things will go and walk through it rather than forensically timing things and that kind of thing. So there are steps that I go through. but a lot of it is done at a relatively high level. So when I walk in for a keynote, for example, I'll never write 3 pages of notes. I stick to key points and know what I'm going to be flowing through. But I've done it 20 times in my head before I've walked in there. So the script is pretty kind of fluid.
How did you develop the skills to visualize? Because it can be tricky visualizing and just staying focused because your brain wants to take you in all different directions. Did you develop that skill somewhere else?
I think it comes down to a degree to the Strength Finder stuff. But I tell you, I heard something amazing.
Yay, my favourite tool.
But the interesting thing I heard one time was Anthony Robbins was talking about, I think he was talking to, I can't even remember the celebrity, but it's a celebrity that had a really hard time, and he'd say, how were you feeling before you kind of knew you couldn't do it? She said, I'm ready to go on stage. My palms get sweaty. My mouth goes dry. And I start getting knots in my stomach. And I know I just can't do it. Mm. And he said, he spoke to Bruce Springsteen. He said, how do you know when you're ready? He says, I stand backstage. My palms go sweaty. My mouth goes dry. My stomach goes in knots. And I know I'm ready. So what I find is that
that's great.
The feeling, because the feeling when you get up and you speak in front of people, it's that reptilian, mammalian stuff kicking in. It's not natural. So it's nervy, but it's really just that kind of like perception that you put to it. So I perceive this as like, okay, I'm going to get a rush of adrenaline. The minute that they hand the mic to me, I get that kind of out-of-body experience. And once I get through that, and then I'm just, everyone wants me to succeed. So it's a story you tell yourself.
Yes.
So I think the question you asked was, how do I visualize things? I'm a bit of a daydreamer. I don't know. I just kind of play through it that way. But I don't know. I think it just comes with a bit of practice and quiet time and put the headphones on and write the notes, whatever works for you, I guess.
Yeah. And you're right about it's how you interpret that moment, the perception, because reality can be the same, but 2 different people have different perceptions on what that is. Justin Langer, the cricketer, I was listening to a podcast he did, and he actually practiced transcendental meditation. And a cricketer in New Zealand told him to do it when he wasn't performing so well. And he said that changed everything for him. Yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Seems, and I was listening to another podcast with Tim Ferriss talking about the top 90 performers he interviewed.
Yes.
And they all sort of have this thing of practice of meditation that they do every morning.
Yeah, look, the interesting thing for me, I've tried.
I've tried too.
It's so hard to quieten the mind. But what I find is, there's lots of things I think you and I would have listened to about mindfulness and about deep work. And really for me, I find flow in when I'm really, if I'm planning a workshop, I turn off all my interruptions, I close the door and, go on flight mode and I just get right there. And I think that's mindfulness. That's like real focus. And I have a very busy mind when I'm trying to be quiet, but if I am concentrating on designing something, I can just stick to it.
That's great. But you're also a surfer as well. So I imagine there's a bit of mindfulness in that.
That absolutely is my meditation.
I think so. When I go running, that's the same thing. I actually come up with my best ideas because I'm quieting my brain. It finally has a chance to get through.
Do you know, there's a podcast I heard just the other day, and I'm going to get the book. It's just about to come out. It was an Aubrey Marcus podcast of someone Holiday.
Ryan Holiday.
Yeah, he's written a bunch of books, but his latest one is called Still. I think it's called Still.
Mm-hmm.
And he writes the whole book and he doesn't mention the word meditation. And he says he swims. And when he swims, he's absolutely immersed in the moment. I think meditation he's found quite hard, but we get this opportunity to be still in lots of different ways. And when I'm facilitating, when I'm training, it's kind of like you're in that flow state.
Yeah, it's funny because the day goes so quickly. I don't know about the participants, but for me, it's certainly like, you start off at the end of the day, you're like, wow, where did that time go? Because you're so in the moment focused on building up the energy, creating the contrast, making sure people understand.
Do you know what's interesting as well is that when you are delivering a training session, a good one, you are empathizing for your audience. So you are doing the same thing as a customer experience design. You've designed the experience based on what you want them to feel, what you want, whether you want their energy to be, where you want them to concentrate. So it is a bit like you can plan it, but the individuals in the room are going to take the conversation in different ways. They might not get an activity the way that you want it to get it. So you are really reacting, but you've planned to a long degree where you want it to go, but you need to navigate as it goes. And that's like experience management. You don't want to script an interaction with a customer to look like this. You need it to be authentic and real. So you build the connection and then you kind of navigate your way through and then it becomes memorable. So designing training is really like best practice of designing a customer experience.
I agree. I think facilitation is experience management. It is. Yeah. Love the connection. I can't end the interview without asking you about your moment sharing the stage with Obama.
Oh,
I was going to ask you, what's the best conference you've ever been to? And I feel like this will be your answer, but I mean, it doesn't have to be, but it's a pretty cool story. I'd love our listeners to hear it.
Well, I went to a conference in the States. I go every year. It's the world's largest experience management conference. And it's hosted by the business that we partner with for technology, Qualtrics. And they are an experience management company. So they make sure that they put on a great experience. They have their own team that put on this event. There was 14,000 people there last year. It's huge. And I mean, on the bill was Obama, Richard Branson, Ashton Kutcher, Oprah. The year before they brought in Elton John for the entertainment.
Oh my gosh, I love Elton John.
Well, I saw him up close. It was amazing.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, so the whole thing is an experience, that's for sure. But at the beginning of the conference, the CEO, Ryan Smith, he got up and introduced who's coming in, and on the big screen there's this huge picture of Obama, and next minute, right where Obama's picture was, there's a huge picture of Tom Scantlebury. That's how I shared the stage with him. My picture shared the stage. Now, what actually happened was they have this thing, and they actually do this at other conferences now. They created this thing called the Dream Team. So they've got Qualtrics employees running around. They've got the app, and they ask, what can we do to make the conference exceptional?
Oh, I love that. That's a great pre-question.
Yeah, so they ask that question beforehand.
Yeah.
And then all the way through the conference, if you want an apple, put a request in the Dream Team. Someone will find you amongst 10,000 people and hand you an apple. And I think they delivered 5,000 or more requests during the conference. So they nail it. But I took my wife to this particular conference, and I'd been off the last couple of years, and I come back and she thinks that I've just been snowboarding in Utah and drinking with all of these people. And so when I wrote my request in, I said, look, I'm bringing my wife along. She doesn't think I've been doing much at these conferences. I've been busy learning and networking, so maybe you could just make me look like a bit of a big deal. So really, I just thought we'll get seated up front, which we did, which was amazing. And then the next minute, Ryan Smith saying, we're fulfilling some of the Dream Team requests, and we've got a guy called Tom Scantlebury from Australia who is a big deal. And so they ran out a red jacket, put it on me, and everybody for the next few days was getting pictures with me. And I actually had a little hashtag. It was ridiculous. And I'm not wearing that jacket back next year. But you know what? There's another lady there. She was studying her MBA. She's a single mum. She wanted to go to the conference but couldn't afford to go. So she sent a message, I think. She baked cookies. She did something like this to make money. Then the CEO found out about it, sent her a note to say, hey, here's a ticket for free. She got up, sitting up the front with us as well, and she got to meet Obama. And that was like the gift for her.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So imagine her experience, right? And so
I want to go to this conference.
Mm-hmm. Next March.
It's open to the public or only...
It's open to the public. It's in Sydney, actually, each year as well. X4. Fantastic.
Even to be part of the Dream Team would be really cool. Just like making dreams happen.
Yeah, that's right. I'm friends with the lady from Sydney, and she flew over to the States to do it as well. And they have so much fun.
They would.
They're exhausted.
But it would be really like kind of like angels for a few days. And
do you know what? That is really what experience management is about. You deliver great connected experiences for customers, then that is satisfying. It's purposeful. And that's really what experience management breaks down to. It's purposeful work. There's no losers out of this. The business gains, the customer gains, and the employee gains. So it's not as if you're training. No offence to anybody who has to train OH&S because it's important, but there is some pretty boring kind of content that you have to train. But when you get into this, it's really easy to take people along the journey. And when they can tap in and really see that, okay, I go and deliver this, then I get that real satisfaction out of what I do. My work becomes much more purposeful. Even better, you get recognised for it because you've got a measurement platform in place, and it really does make the workplace more constructive.
Yeah. And I think that's also why I guess people are drawn to listen to this podcast. People that listen to this podcast aren't happy with just delivering some dry content. Like they actually want to they're looking for new tools and information to one thing that's going to make that experience better for their participants. So I think it's very aligned. Just to wrap up, what's one piece of advice you could offer to someone that is starting their facilitation journey, getting up and delivering workshops?
Well, I think that you need to back yourself a little bit. You're putting yourself out there. You're up there, and I think you're quite often hard on yourself, so things won't go to plan. You might plan an activity and it kind of tanks, and
we've all been there.
Yeah. So, it's not going to be smooth sailing. And here's the thing as well, is that I train this a lot, is we're all humans and feedback is hard to take. Mm-hmm. Negative feedback's hard to take. I'm in the game of feedback. I love good feedback. Everybody does. But it's harder to take those responses you get from participants that didn't necessarily enjoy what you did. And that's the process. We've heard this model called SARA, shock, anger, resistance, and then acceptance. Yeah. So you'll focus on those 2 negative comments over those 48 incredibly positive comments. So there's something to learn all the time, and I think that you expend so much emotion. It's so energizing. At the end of the day, you really are exhausted.
You are,
Yeah, you've really worked hard, so you develop a lot. But it's important to just kind of back yourself and pick yourself up when you don't have those kind of experiences go completely right, because I think there's we call it flearning. Failing but learning.
Oh, lovely. That's a new one. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's more to learn from when things don't go right than when they do. And, it's such a journey, and it's really rewarding, and it's worth sticking it out.
That's, really great advice. Thanks for sharing that SARA model. My friend Cameron Fee, he used to co-facilitate with a guy around Queensland, and they used to do something called violent feedback at the end of their workshop. So 2 minutes just to tell each other as facilitators what didn't work. Very harsh word, but he said he learned a lot from it. So if people want to connect with you, Tom, find out what you do, find out more about customer experience, or just creating great experiences in general, where can they find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Tom Scantlebury, and the business is Sky Blue Customer Experience Services. So Sky Blue CX is, got a webpage online.
Cool. And we'll link to that in the show notes for this. Tom, it's been so great having you on the show. Could have talked for hours about this stuff. Like I said, it really resonates with me because this show is all about creating great experiences. And I loved the examples that you gave and how your company works this in with clients. And it's good to know that organisations out there are keen to improve the experience. Like you said, it just makes it better for us civilians experiencing these things. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight. And make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.